They called her useless long before they called her by her name. In the dusty mining town of Red Hollow, weakness was a crime. If you couldn't swing a hammer, haul water, scrub floors, or cook for 30 men without collapsing, you were nothing. And Clara Whitmore, thin as a reed, pale as winter light, collapsed often. She hadn't always been sick. Once, she had run through open fields outside town, her laughter louder than the river. But after her father died in a tunnel cave-in and her mother followed him to the grave a year later from fever, Clara was left in the care of Mr. Harlan Briggs, the boarding house owner who cared more about profit than people. "You eat, you work," he would growl. But Clara couldn't keep food down most days. Her hands trembled when she tried to carry trays. The cough that rattled her chest sounded like something tearing from the inside. The miners hated weakness. "You're too sick to work." One of them spat once after she dropped a pot of stew. "Then you're too sick to eat." The beating came that night. Harlan didn't need much excuse. A broken plate, a missed chore, a dizzy spell. Each time, his belt reminded her what the world thought of fragile girls. She learned to stay quiet, to make herself small, to hide bruises beneath long sleeves. But even silence couldn't protect her. One bitter winter evening, Clara fainted in the snow behind the boarding house after hauling water from the well. The bucket tipped. Ice-cold water soaked her thin boots. She tried to stand, but the world went black. When she opened her eyes, voices surrounded her. "Just leave her," someone muttered. "She's always pretending." "Town burden," another said. Boots shuffled. Laughter faded. But one pair of boots didn't move. He had come into town only that morning, a tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with weathered skin and quiet eyes. His name was Samuel Reed. He lived alone on a small ranch miles outside Red Hollow, speaking more to horses than to men. Samuel had buried his wife 3 winters ago. Since then, silence had been his only companion. He looked down at the unconscious girl in the snow. Her cheek was bruised. Her lips were blue from cold. And even in collapse, her hands were clenched like she expected another blow. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered. Because in Red Hollow, cruelty wasn't questioned. Samuel removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her fragile body. She barely weighed anything as he lifted her. "She ain't your problem," Harlan barked from the boarding house door. Samuel's jaw tightened. "She is now." He carried her through town under a sky heavy with falling snow. No one stopped him. At his ranch, he laid her gently on his own. Bared the first time another human had crossed that threshold since his wife died. She woke in the middle of the night, panicked, coughing, disoriented. "Don't, please, I'll work, I can work," she gasped. Samuel stepped into the lamplight, hands raised slightly. "You ain't gotta work here!" She stared at him like he had spoken another language. He brought her warm broth. She hesitated, expecting it to be taken away. "It's yours," he said simply. And for the first time in years, Clara ate without fear. Days passed. Samuel discovered the truth the town never cared to see. Clara wasn't lazy. She was ill. Fever came and went. Her lungs were weak. Her body trembled not from stubbornness, but from sickness left untreated. He rode 30 miles to fetch a doctor. "Why bother?" The doctor scoffed. "She won't last the winter." Samuel's voice dropped to a tone colder than the snow outside. "Then you better make sure she does." Back at the ranch, Clara slowly began to heal, not just in body, but in spirit. She flinched at sudden movements, apologized for breathing too loud, tried to scrub floors the moment she could stand. Samuel would gently stop her. "You're not a burden." The words broke something inside her. One evening, as the fire crackled and snow tapped against the windows, she whispered, "Why?" He didn't answer at first, because the truth was simple. He saw himself in her, broken, alone, told they were too much or not enough. "You deserve better," he finally said. And Clara wept, not from pain this time, but from being seen. But Red Hollow wasn't finished with her. Harlan Briggs didn't like losing what he considered property, and when he realized Clara wasn't coming back, he rode out to Samuel's ranch with 2 men and a rifle. The knock on the door wasn't friendly. Clara froze. Samuel stood, and for the first time in her life, someone stood between her and the storm. The wind howled outside as Samuel opened the door. Harlan stood there, red-faced and furious. "You took what's mine." Samuel's expression didn't change. "She ain't yours." Clara trembled behind him, old fear crawling up her spine. "She owes me," Harlan shouted. "Food, shelter, care—" "You beat her," Samuel interrupted. Silence fell like a gunshot. The two men behind Harlan shifted uncomfortably. "She's weak," Harlan sneered. "Too sick to work, useless." Samuel stepped forward, filling the doorway. "She's sick because nobody cared enough to help." Harlan reached for his rifle, but Samuel was faster. Years of ranch life, of surviving harsh winters and harder men, had honed him into something steady and unshakable. "You point that thing," Samuel said quietly, "and you won't leave this ranch." The men behind Harlan hesitated, because this wasn't town soil anymore. This was Samuel's land, and he had nothing left to lose. After a long, tense moment, Harlan spat into the snow. "She ain't worth this trouble." He turned his horse around. "Then why'd you come?" Samuel called after him. No answer came, only the sound of retreating hooves. Inside, Clara collapsed into a chair, shaking. "He'll come back," she whispered. "Not while I'm breathing," Samuel replied. And he meant it. Winter deepened, but Clara grew stronger. With medicine, warmth, and steady meals, color returned to her cheeks. The cough softened. The tremors eased. But healing wasn't just physical. Some nights she still woke screaming. Some days she stared out the window like she expected to be dragged back. Samuel never pushed, never demanded gratitude, never treated her like a charity case. Instead, he taught her small things: how to feed the horses without strain, how to mend a fence post, how to sit in silence without fear. And slowly Clara began to laugh again. The first time it happened, Samuel nearly dropped the bucket he was holding. It was small, fragile, but it was real. Spring melted the snow, and with it, Clara shed the last pieces of the girl Red Hollow had broken. One afternoon, she stood in the field under wide blue sky and said softly, "I'm not sick anymore." Samuel looked at her. "You were never useless." She turned to him then, with strength in her eyes. "You saved me." He shook his head. "No, you survived." Months later, word reached town that Harlan's boarding house had shut down. Too many complaints, too many whispers about bruises. Red Hollow moved on. But Clara didn't. She chose to stay at the ranch, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found somewhere she belonged. Years passed. The fragile girl they once mocked became a strong woman, who ran half the ranch herself. She rode beside Samuel at sunrise. She stood tall in town when they went together, no longer invisible. And when people asked who she was, Samuel would answer proudly, "She's the strongest person I know." Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's surviving what should have destroyed you. And sometimes it's finding the one person who refuses to let you break.